very necessary for all of us. And just to get together here, it's like meeting old family. I mean, I think a lot of us know each other, and we've discussed issues like this through the years, but now there's one forum, and please interrupt if you want to ask something. I was asked to define contemporary jewelry. Now, my reality, and after this intimidating reality, my reality is actually something completely different. I haven't been a student, obviously, for many, many years. I am not an academic. So, I've been working in my own workshop, minding my own business, but knowing what I want to convey. I wanted to let people get to know this kind of jewelry that I always wanted to make. And I wanted them to get used to the style, and what I found very interesting is through the years, it's now been about 30 years, of having this business and starting to introduce people to this kind of jewelry. If I just think the clients that I met 30 years ago, what they wanted and what they want now is not something you can buy in a normal retail shop. They're starting to be much more interested in design-based work. So I think hopefully we are doing something right. But faced with this question, now I must start thinking of what is contemporary jewelry. I thought, let's go back to history. And that's a very strange thing for me to do now. Through the years, what was the function of jewelry? Through the ages, the function of jewelry was to establish a status. To establish your social status, to establish your economical status, and to establish your cultural status. In other words, are you married? Are you not married? Have you got a sweetheart? Are you part of something? Are you part of an army? Are you a royal? Are you rich? Are you poor? And I just gave you some samples of jewelry through the ages where that was the only question you asked. That was the only thing that was important. The other thing that jewelry was also a vehicle for, it was only a vehicle for precious metals and precious stones. That was what it was used for. The basic design was not that important, the intrinsic design. What was important is how are you going to combine these precious stones and the precious metal to make it a piece of jewelry. I think that one can stay for a while. Yeah, thank you for it. And the materials through the ages dictated design. You know, through the ages, whether it was gold, platinum, or whether it was what kind of stones you used, that dictated designs through the ages. And it was never questioned. Well, I wouldn't say never. I think we can say, yeah, it was questioned, but let's just say generally, it was never questioned. Whether, you know, there was something else, something different. And even in the time of very commercial jewelry, when things were starting to become mass-produced, design was never the main vehicle. Design was a sideline, and what we produced was a very generic kind of jewelry, which unfortunately was very easy and readable for the consumer. And I think that's what makes our job quite difficult. It's so easy to read and to understand commercial jewelry. So now we've got a job that we have to do. What defines contemporary jewelry? I think the basis of contemporary jewelry is artistic expression. And interestingly enough, contemporary jewelry started to become known after the Second World War. And as Dion just now said about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, I don't know when I know the previous one was at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, the previous Industrial Revolution. And that is actually, if you look at the arts and crafts movement, that was against the very industrialization. This this movement developed, because of that, I wonder whether we can't question what he said, whether there'll be a backlash again, but that's something to debate later. And what I find interesting, although contemporary jewellery was first recorded officially after the Second World War, during the arts and crafts movement, and these pieces are pieces from the arts and crafts movement at the end of the century, there were already principles that we adhere to now, where metal wasn't that important, certain stones weren't that important, design was becoming more and more important. And so actually, although we only started recognizing contemporary jewelry in the 1940s, it actually started insidiously years before. So it's not something that starts with a day and that is it. So in 1946, there was an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Modern handmade jewelry. And I think officially, ladies and gentlemen, that is where it all started. Okay, what defines contemporary jewelry? I think the basic, there's a lot of things we can say, but the basic things, it's an artistic expression that is much more important than preciousness, than wearability, than value. And a lot of independent jewelers developed. They were mostly art school trained, which is a very important factor. And they started to question the tradition of traditional jewelry. They started to question the whole status issue. They started to question the whole use of materials and precious stones, and they started to distance themselves from the conventional jewelry. But because they were art school trained, they also had a lot of influence from art movements, and obviously after the Second World War, modernism developed, then expressionism. Please, I'm not, these art historians make me very nervous, but in that, that started to develop contemporary, and what I find interesting is even in South Africa, that piece of Erich Frey. Erich Frey was a contemporary jeweler about in the 30s, and he started employing the very modernist, simple designs, where the metal wasn't important, the stones were important, but the design was very important. Another one was George Jensen. We all know he's a Danish designer who actually did wonderful modernist work. And then there was another new interesting field of artists. So there's this whole interweaving that starts happening. Of an artist like Alexander Calder, who was one of the fine artists who actually made 1,800 pieces of jewelry, which I found. He made it himself. Not the fine artists gave the designs to jewelers, and the jewelers had to make it. This guy made his own, and I think this whole interaction is starting to happen with work like that, where we're starting to ask the question, is it now art? Is it jewelry? Are things changing? Are things interweaving with each other? As I said, a new language started to develop. Also, another thing that started to develop was new materials. With the Industrial Revolution and after that, and after the Second World War, there was a lot of new materials, a lot of new technology that the people started to use. They were not scared of using that. And what I find amazing is artists like Gijs Bakker made that, what do you think it is? A brooch or earring, I don't know. But he took a picture out of a newspaper, laminated that, added a piece of jewelry. They still made conventional things like we do, brooches, like this one I'm wearing that's made from a milk bottle. They made necklaces, but it was completely rethinking the whole model that we knew. A necklace, also by Gijs Bakker, that is actually a photo of the flower, and this is the new look. Then my favorite, Otto Kunzi, who made this brooch that was made out of a piece of compressed foam rubber and covered with wallpaper. This is now a brooch. So we're all starting to question this whole thing that we used to. We're also questioning modern culture. The Otto Kunzli that took Mickey Mouse and moved that, or made that into a brooch. So you can see that is where the whole contemporary, and now it is full-blown contemporary jewelry, where the whole contemporary jewelry thing is going. As I said, there was a lot of new technology and new materials, and also a lot of, what can I say, cross-pollination. This guy, David Watkins, used aluminium. There was a new technology of how to work with aluminium, how to color it. So a lot of jewelry was made from aluminium, no more gold, silver. Felica van der Lees took an applied art form that is crocheting, or perhaps a housewife's art form, and she started making contemporary jewelry. So in other words, just making us think. Marjorie Schick made these wonderful necklaces out of paint. I think it's wood. Sorry, if somebody knows that is something else, please stop me. But I think it's just to show you what new materials and new things people started using. And jewelry also made a bid for art status. Jewelers wanted to be known as artists. I don't know whether that was so successful, but they made a bid for art status, and the whole conceptual art movement also made Lauren Kalman. The concept of this jewelry, I think it's absolutely beautiful, but when somebody told me what the concept behind it was actually, what was it? To cover up bad diseases. But what we see is something beautiful. And there's once again Alexander Calder, who's taken the symbols and the shapes and whatever he used in his fine art and just moved it into a piece of jewelry. Okay, what does contemporary mean? That I also wanted to analyze. Contemporary in the Oxford Dictionary means now and current and at the moment. So technically, if we look at it, it's actually everything that's made now. So we can't say, I wonder sometimes whether the word contemporary is the right word, because it could be commercial jewelry, it could be fine jewelry, it could be art jewelry. Is contemporary still relevant? But in jewelry terms, contemporary jewelry is a specific movement that lasted and is still probably lasting for more or less 50 years, from the World War until the beginning of the 21st century. So, yes, please.
One moment.
I'm nearly finished. But to all the jewelers here, what I want to say is, no matter what you do, no matter what message or medium you are using, we are all now here presently making beautiful wearable objects. But we now have, which I think is an amazing thing, the full knowledge that the people didn't previously have of history. We've got the knowledge of materials, and we've got the knowledge of concept. That has now become part of our whole being as contemporary jewelers. And the final question, final thing I want to say, hasn't jewelry transcended the boundaries that we have put there in the years where the whole movement started to develop, where we had to fight prejudices? The early days of this movement, there was a journalist or an art critic, I think, Benjamin Lignell, who said in 2008, in an article in the Metalsmith magazine, he said, let's be proud and just call it jewelry. And I think that was the beginning of rethinking the whole concept of a contemporary theme. Is it so relevant anymore? I don't even want to talk about postmodernism. I'm too intimidated. I want to put my toe into a pool of water and say, isn't that absolutely what happened with postmodernism? That the boundaries are just, there isn't any boundaries anymore. Contemporary jewelry is an artistic, reflexive practice. I think it's become an artistic, reflective practice for all of us. It just happens. The lines are blurred, and the artists borrow freely from each other. And I think that is what we must go for now. Thank you very much.
Like what I find difficult to understand or like agree with is the like lack of emphasis on technique. So I wanted to ask, like in your opinion, how important is technique in contemporary jewelry?
I think it is extremely important, and I think a terrible thing, one of the backlashes of contemporary jewelry, what happened is people forgot about technique. And they started just to kind of, there's an Afrikaans expression, spoeg and plak, everything together. And because it was badly made, they said, oh, don't worry about that, we now be artists. And I think that is another problem with contemporary jewelry. And I hope that we will start emphasizing, well, I think a lot of us working here emphasizes technique. And I think without technique, there's no validity in this whole movement. So I think technique is much more important, and thank you for that question, than anybody knows, and that we all know. Yeah.